Finally, Mormons' abstinence from addictive substances might prompt depression sufferers to seek more legitimate forms of help. In researching this topic, I visited a chat room for Mormon women on antidepressant medication. Of 64 postings over a 2-month period, only 3 postings cited gender as a significant determinant in mental health issues, but each one of them also expressed a defensive attitude about whether being a Mormon woman actually exacerbated their depression. One woman asserted, quote, "I believe that having depression, anxiety, bipolar, or other mental disorders do not make us weak women. There are countless researches done that show that we simply have a chemical imbalance in our brains. They also show that more often than not, it's genetic," unquote. One attributed LDS women's avoidance of alcohol and coffee to the need to control depression through medication and counseling. Quote, "LDS women experience depression more acutely because they don't go out and get drunk to mask their pain. Another example is they don't drink coffee in the morning to minimize the fatigue that often accompanies depression," unquote. Instead of dwelling on so-called gender depression, chat participants focused more on perceptions of medication use, hormonal imbalances, genetic predisposition, non-gendered shared experience among those using antidepressants, difficulties overcoming stress, and the need for greater sympathy and awareness by non-sufferers, both inside and outside of the church. Further, the recent outing of Mormon composer Michael McLean has brought attention to depression as an increasingly non-gendered issue in the church. Since 1994, many sociologists and historians have attempted to respond to the Prozac study with quantitative and qualitative research regarding contentment and mental health among Mormon women. Although difficult to quantify, qualitative research regarding Mormon women's contentment has been useful in disregarding this Prozac stereotype, although journalists are still slow to pick up on those things that question the Prozac stereotype. In particular, sociologists Sherry Mills Johnson and Marie Cornwall at BYU have directly taken on misperceptions about Mormon women and depression. Cornwall's very prolific studies, and some of you may be familiar with Marie's work, it's very broad and extensive, have shown that Mormon women's life satisfaction issues are much more complex than stereotypical portrayals of the submissive and degraded female. Although Cornwall has also shown that Mormon women tend to have a higher depression rate than Mormon men do, but that also could be tied into other complex factors. More recently, Sherry Johnson's 2004 study determined that LDS women are less likely to be depressed than American women in general and show no major differences in overall life satisfaction compared to women nationwide. By comparing a 1992-94 survey of over 3,000 non-LDS women and 2 national surveys of over 2,000 LDS women, Johnson made successful comparisons regarding life satisfaction, contentment, and measurements of depression and self-esteem. In terms of criteria such as residence, work, friendship, health, family life, and financial situation, she found, quote, "There were no statistically significant differences in response between Mormon women and non-LDS women." Further, although, quote, "traditional women's roles involved with marriage and homemaking have long been cited as part of the reason for the purported depression, still, interestingly enough, national women were 3 to 4 times as dissatisfied with their work as Mormon women." Although Mormon women scored 10% lower on self-esteem rankings than non-LDS women did, Johnson suggested that the findings could be a reflection of the higher standards that are espoused by the church and also Mormons' tendency to against pride and not wanting to brag. However, LDS women claim to only suffer from general depressive symptoms on average 1 day a week, whereas non-LDS women experience depressive symptoms 1.5 days per week. Further, 62% of returned missionary women and 52% of non-returned missionary women in LDS culture claimed happy marriages, as opposed to only 38% of non-LDS women. Although these findings should significantly alter, quote, "the characterization of LDS women as more depressed than others," unquote, still, the debate continues as to why antidepressant sales are high in Utah. According to Johnson, to date, no conclusive evidence has been presented that proves that LDS women are more depressed or take more antidepressants than other women. Instead, Johnson stands by the most significant finding of her study, that, quote, "increased religiosity predicted increased life satisfaction and mental well-being." This is supported by sociologists of other religions who have also found comparative conclusions and a link between religious practices or involvement and better mental and physical health, as well as reduced criminal activity among youth, unquote. Stacy Hucks Christiansen and Janice Johnson have further examined the valuable connections between religiosity and contentment. Johnson constructed an email survey and received responses from more than 750 women of different ages, education levels, and marital status. On a scale between 1 and 10, with 10 reflecting the highest level of contentment, the average rating was 8.7. Only 50 women rated their contentment between 1 and 5 on that scale, and 724 between 6 and 10. Johnson further examined women's diverse written responses that accompanied their numerical rankings and discovered similar findings to Christiansen's 1997 thesis on Mormon women and empowerment. Some of you may be familiar with her thesis. Both Johnson and Christiansen determined that Mormon women who feel empowered have successfully negotiated a strong sense of well-being and contentment, even within the structure of a patriarchal religion. Women in both studies expressed satisfaction in belonging to a religion that values, quote, traditionally female characteristics and experiences, which generally stood in contrast to their perceptions of how the world sees traditional female experiences. Particularly for convert women, they felt a great contrast between their self-worth before conversion and greater sense of personal value and esteem following their conversion. One convert noted, "Since joining the church at the age of 24, I have gained an understanding of my true potential and calling in life. As a wife and mother, as a daughter of God, being able to leave behind the idea that a woman is worthless unless she can compete with a man in the business world has been very liberating and satisfying to me. It feels right to be where I am and to be doing what I am doing now. I have also felt equality within the church that I didn't outside the church." Many women cited greater access to spiritual power, opportunities for service, and development and growth that came with church callings. Others referred to the church's higher regard for motherhood as extremely empowering, since Mormon women, quote, perceive that motherhood is undervalued in society at large, yet in contrast, the church validates their perception of the import of a mother's role, unquote. Finally, most women cited the faith and knowledge of their divine purpose as empowering, or being taught and internalizing for myself that I'm truly a daughter of God, said one respondent. Christiansen's thesis outlined findings similar to Johnson's regarding women's empowerment within a patriarchal religion. She hypothesizes that, quote, within any patriarchal religion, the presence of women seeking empowerment has potential for intense conflict. Yet I hypothesize that there are women within this order who feel empowered because of the values that the church places on traditional female characteristics and because of the sense of connection that LDS women feel towards other LDS women, their ecclesiastical leaders, and family members. The fact that some women have been able to empower themselves within the patriarchal system suggests several things. First, it undermines popular notions of patriarchy as inherently destructive or as only capable of oppression. It also presents a more complex picture of the society that patriarchy creates. In the lives of these women whose marginal status should make them casualties of the system, it may be the very characteristic of patriarchy that have facilitated their empowerment. Christiansen separates Mormon women's experiences into three categories: the empowered, as she calls them, the unempowered, and the largest group, those processing empowerment. Of her whole sample, 24% had experienced depression, and all of those that had experienced depression had sought some form of professional help. For Christiansen, the most significant category included the majority of her women respondents who were processing empowerment, or those working through the empowerment process through personal belief and faith, personal revelation, and relationships with family and ecclesiastical leaders. Christiansen cites various factors that affected women's sense of empowerment, which included the occurrence of life-altering experiences, personal belief systems, the idea of personal progression, and faith in God, and the ability to challenge belief systems that don't match individual experiences. Other factors included education level, knowledge of doctrine, return missionary status, work experience, experiences in church leadership positions, and age. Quote, because the younger the woman, the more empowered she will feel because her culture has validated the experience of women, and she would have grown up with the questions and answers from previous generations of women who challenged traditional gender issues. In other words, for those of us of the younger generation, sometimes it's a little easier because the battles were fought earlier, and now we're benefiting from the fruits of some of the battles. In conclusion, Mormon women do not suffer from depression on any significantly greater level than their national counterparts. Further, any qualitative assessment of life satisfaction needs to reject monolithic stereotypes of women's so-called tendency to depression and instead reflect diverse factors such as age, education, genetics, and access to counseling service and support networks. Like women in other patriarchal religions who have felt happiness and contentment because of their relationship with God and their sense of divine purpose, Mormon women have, quote, found solace, inspiration, nurturance, sustenance, and spiritual growth, unquote.